What a really superb entry, Richard. You've done something really great here. I just feel like the proportions of all of the different passages are beautifully balanced, and proportions not just in terms of the quantity and weight and relationships of the instruments to one another, but also of the passages to one another. I feel like you had a really good conception going through all of this of how one part should follow another, one passage should follow another. And I think I can help you with a lot of stuff in here still, but I'm going to point out a few real strengths in here. So notice how Richard has decided to break up his grace notes so that we don't, for instance, have like the B slurring to the B, right? Which is something that we saw in a lot of entries, right? Rather, we have B slurring down to G sharp, and here we have F double sharp slurring up to B. So we avoid that whole problem of the of a tied grace note, right? Which basically forces the player to come in early and then maybe possibly throw off the rhythm of the players around them. So, yeah, there are a few other really cool things as well. One thing that I would say right in here is that there's still a little bit of room for some work, I think, with the harp part. I think if you are going to, for instance, have, if you really want harp to play a role in here, then you have to bring down the volume of everything enormously, right? Fortissimo in harp it doesn't matter. Fortissimo in pizzicato in the other strings is going to basically swallow everything that the harp does. So the only way that you could really have the harp contribute meaningfully to this passage would be if either of these parts was up or down an octave, right? So if the strings dropped down an octave and you left the harp where it was, or maybe jumped the harp up an octave. I mean, here you are, yes, it's basically the same pitches, right? So I would say maybe a better way to approach this would be to have the harp jump up an octave and then just bring everybody else down to, say, mezzo forte, right? And leave the harp at fortissimo. However, the other problem that you've got is that you've got a big xylophone line right in here. And that xylophone line, the xylophone absorbs the sound of harp. Here you've got bassoons A2 very exposed, right? And I almost feel that, like, it would be better to have that as clarinets or as oboes. See, like, the tenor register for bassoon is really more of a solo register. It's really more intended for one instrument, right? Because that same quality, that kind of edgier, hard quality, doesn't really sound all that beautiful up in tenor register with exposed A2 players, right? I mean, note performer or whatever other sound set that you might be using on this is telling you that this sort of sounds like a horn. Well, I would say just use a horn then. If that is the intended effect, use a horn at, say, like mezzo forte. If you're going to keep this at fortissimo, or have a single bassoon, or have A2 clarinets or oboes, right? Yeah, with A2 oboes, you get sort of a more nasal effect. I hate that word because it's just a shortcut that really robs the oboe of any kind of individuality. Just to say nasal, I don't like that but here it would apply, right? But whatever that is, whether it is A2 bassoons or whether it is oboes or a horn or whatever, it will still absorb the sound of this first note in the horn part as well, and kind of sort of swallow the sound of the harp even more. So the harp is not balanced here, and it is basically just a big acoustic problem. Now, these big rolls, though, are great. Just make them bigger. Make it a big, huge hand-over-hand roll, kind of, where you have like left hand, right hand, left hand coming over the top. then I think that it will meaningfully contribute to this. But then you've got these horns and trumpets right in here, right? So that is going to really swallow the sound of the harp. Almost better to have like some kind of glissando right in here over, like, maybe if there's a way that you can figure out some tuning of the kind of D minor seventh right in here. If you figure out some kind of enharmonic tuning, and then just like do a glissando through there of about 4 or 5 octaves, then I think that it would work even better right in here. Okay, now, so that's the picky stuff. Now let's talk about the evaluation criteria, and I'll also discuss the orchestration and everything else. So there are a few little careless bits here and there, like for instance, you got an A sharp here and a B flat there, and so on. And there was a little bit of proofreading I think you needed to do later on. Some key parts have got the wrong notes, but I'll mention those as I go along. But I'll leave it to you to work out and to proofread, because the thing about this, Richard, is that I feel that this is one of the arrangements that's almost ready for the stands. And and really you should really try to pursue trying to get this performed if you have any access to to an orchestra. If there could be an orchestra that would be available, then I would say to give it a go, because it really is a strong score. You know what I mean? And it just artistically as well as just in terms of the craft. Okay, so let's discuss those criteria. Okay, so you're starting off, and you really are kind of sticking pretty much to the pitch weight being in the upper middle register of the piano, right? It doesn't really get a whole lot bigger. Not really. You really are kind of up in that area. But I would say of the arrangements that do that, then it's okay. But that is sort of leading to the other question, that is thematic material repeating often, possibly sounding repetitive if orchestrated exactly the same way twice. Well, you don't actually orchestrate things exactly the same way twice. You just add these muted horns and trumpets right in here, and I think mute is the right effect here, not stopped. I think that the mute will give you just exactly that right kind of sound in here. So yeah, this is very nicely done, and it helps to it's just a little touch here, and it keeps it progresses the texture from here, right? So this is what I'm talking about. I think early on when I was discussing this, some people were saying, I think they had 1 or 2 comments were saying like, well, come on, I mean, it's well done, and what are you saying, that you want me to do something completely different the next time? What's the point of that? And that's not what I was saying at all. What I was talking about was progressing the texture, and even in a small way like this, or and then some other ones, just had like one touch of the timpani, just like a timpani stroke on the downbeat was enough to change the context of the entire, or the sense of urgency, right? So I feel that is a really valid way of dealing with this. Now, let's talk about the orchestration. You've got A2 flutes, doubling first violins. You've got oboes, doubling second violins and violas. You've got that top note being doubled by A clarinet. I think A clarinet is just as valid a choice for this as B flat. They both work in different ways. There are advantages to either of those models. And then, like the lower note being played by cello. And this is interesting, like the way that you've scored cello in treble clef. Without any reference to future treble clef scoring in the cellos here, I would say that this would be just as well scored for tenor clef, because that high B is a good upper limit for tenor clef, and it really is a more tenory kind of a passage than it is like a kind of a soprano register passage for the cello. So, I mean, if we, like, I don't, this looks a bit like a Sibelius score with Norfolk, with a Norfolk, or actually, I think it's just my eyesight is really bad. I look at the top of of treble clefs now, and they look rounded to me. So this, I guess, this isn't Norfolk. This is like more the standard Opus font, I think it's called. So yeah, so I don't have this. I think, but this looks like a Sibelius score to me. Anyways, so I can't open it up and fiddle around with it. But I would say try to change this to a tenor clef and see what it looks like. And I think you'll see it just really is looks pretty convenient to the player. Okay, now I really like these touches here that you've got. In addition to flutes and first clarinet and first violins hitting that B, you've also got the xylophone kind of hammering away in it. And the cumulative effect of this is that it really does sound almost guitar-like, or I mean, you can hear the piano origins inside it, right? With just that one little touch. It's it's that same thing. You can add one tiny little quality to a chord, and then it can make it feel like the entire chord is involved with that particular quality, right? So in this case, we've just added the kind of percussive quality of the xylophone on top, and it's not very loud, right? It's forte to the fortissimo, which I think is a good decision. And then that makes it you can sort of feel like almost the rattling sound of the kind of almost the quasi roll, of the strum of the guitar that Falla puts into his piano score coming out here, and almost sounding maybe pianistic or guitar-like, right? You sort of feel both of those. So I think that was just a great decision. And then you go to the tension note right in here, and you got this zip from your piccolo and temple block strike and then harp. So like I was saying, if there's a way that you could figure out how to make an enharmonic tuning of a D minor seventh chord, then and then just turn it into a glissando, then I think that you would have, then it would be way stronger right in here. As it is right here, it'll be partially absorbed, especially because xylophone tends to absorb the sound of the harp, right? Because it's doing the same thing that a harp does, but so much more percussively, right? So anytime you have like xylophone and harp duo kind of stuff, you really have to back off the mallet instrument. I wrote a piece that had marimba and harp, and what was great about that was that the marimba's urgency of tone and attack was cooler. It was calmer, and so it didn't swallow the harp as much. Okay, so and then just bringing in these elements right in here. As I said before, really just bring it this beautiful quality. So this is an E fifth, if you are remembering your transposition, and then a D fifth, and just that is enough, right? And then here with our B flat trumpets, this sort of adds the C fourth on top, which gives us our seventh, and then our mediant above, our third above in the D minor seventh chord. Really cool tuning with all the instruments being muted. And I really love the limitations here too. Like all you've got here are a couple of horns in F and trumpet in B flat right here at the beginning, and you're not even adding timpani, right? And still we have like a big sound, really nice sound. Okay, so that addresses the first couple of criteria in my list. The second two are melodic development soaring quite high, accompaniment figures covering a wide range. So just ignoring the harp and pretending it isn't there because we aren't going to hear it anyways. I feel that you do a good job of interpreting the accompaniment figure here, right? And just bringing out those single notes with the bassoons, I think is good, except I think you only need one bassoon player, right? Or maybe one bassoon player playing unison with like a clarinet player might work better than two bassoons. Now, right here, I feel that this is the exact right approach to take. You have A2 flutes, you have piccolo playing unison, and then here they split off into octaves, where the piccolo is going up to that high D, which is possible by, it's a playable note by your first flute player, but it's really kind of not the most musical note to play, right? And the same thing here. We have the first violins running up to here and then going to divisi. That's very, very nice. And then here you're like, there's nothing wrong, like there's nothing unplayable about your the top divisi first violins playing this D and C and then jumping back, right? And that the those two notes being doubled, right, being unison essentially, reinforces the overtones above, which will give more weight to the piccolo part. You would think that it would give too much weight below, but it doesn't. It actually pushes at the piccolo above and makes it feel more informed, right? Now moving on, here is where I feel you trip up, okay? And the reason for that is that what is the resolution here of this phrase? Everybody is racing up to this high E, and the E is so high on the piano, it's just almost like a shock, right? It's like a splash of cold water in the face that, that a piano piece is going to go so high. I mean, you just went all the way up to D that in the previous page, and now you're going to go all the way up to this really, really high E. Okay, so what's going on here? You're spoiling the surprise, right? By giving us all these high dancing notes. Now, this is something interesting about the mock-up. Did you notice that it actually wasn't really all that audible, the piccolo up there? That's because the combined weight of the A2 flutes and the first violins is absorbing the sound of the piccolo anyway, right? So if it's absorbing the sound of the piccolo, then why don't you just not have the piccolo play that high and just have it go unison with the A2 flutes and just do what you did before. And instead of dropping out with a rest or something like that, just have the piccolo down an octave and then run right up to this E in a nice straight line, just like the clarinets are doing an octave below. And then it's great the way that you are staggering the drop off here, but I would say don't leave a rest. Don't leave a gap. Just go straight, just drop straight down, right? Drop straight down a seventh and then keep right on running up in both parts. Because you're already underlining the drop by having A2 trumpets come right in here. And I would say, like, maybe you could get away with just one trumpet here. Would be good enough rather than just the force of A2 trumpets. You've already got xylophones and, I think the more instruments that you can throw in here, and especially the piccolo, that have like a beautiful running line all the way through, and including the second violin. Like, when can the second violin come in and start playing part of the line of the clarinets? As early as possible, so that we don't just have the sudden start on the downbeat here, right? I think that the more you create the illusion that everybody is running up together and then we're gradually gaining steam, but we're not really paying attention to when things start, right? Then I think that it would be the strongest scoring of all. So just think about the implications of everybody running towards this point. Okay. And this is cool right in here, this little reinforcement. Bum, bum, ba, da, 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 that's nice. And then once again, could this be played? You got the first note being played by your second horn, right? So could this be played by horn or by a combination of first bassoon and clarinet? Or, can we do something so we could take away the sense of A2 high tenor register bassoons? It's a playable thing, right? But it isn't necessarily like the most secure sound or the most beautifully, the beauty of the A2 starts to sort of get pulled away. It's really an area where a single bassoon is much stronger, I feel, than two bassoons in a unison. Now, this is great, right? This is great because these are two bassoons doing separate things. I just feel it's stronger, right? And some people may say, well, I don't know about that. Look at what, in this score or that score, this famous score or that famous score. I just still feel, that's just something that doesn't have the same beauty of tone. Now here we're seeing the continuation of a very strong, very apt accompaniment pattern, and once again, like the harp is just really not contributing very much. Okay, and then the same thing here. Like you've got these low harp sounds, right? Those low harp notes, and they just cannot compete with the activity that's going on around them. You would be better off, instead of this, just having pizzicato double basses down here, just playing this single E. All right, well that takes us to our next section in the criteria, which is upper middle register continues on, relentless, if no textural contrast to previous passage. Well, there is a textural contrast, even though you really are keeping things up there, it's still, there still is, it's interesting enough, and there's enough variation and everything else to get away with the way you more or less transcribe those registers. Okay. So you did make some changes here. That's cool. Yeah. So I would just say you don't need this. Just say like there's you don't have to worry about hanging mutes or any kind of quick change. So you don't need this. All you need to do is just mark sense a sword here, right? And same thing here. You don't have to tell them to take off their mutes. They'll see it in the next passage. There'll be in their part there'll be a big tacit, and then they can just they'll just know to do it. All right. Okay, so how is this scored? Pretty well, I would say. I like you've got the A2 flute doubling first violins, and then you've got these parts right in here played by violas and seconds, and then we've got the clarinets playing right up there, and the bassoons below, and we've got cellos and so on. So I think that it works really pretty well. Bum bum bum, and you're allowing the next phrase to start on the second beat, which is absolutely exactly where it should be. And then that's bum 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 bum, and you're pushing at the beginning of each little motive, right? Each little short phrase. Bum 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 bum. And I like the way that you vary the sound here by just going two strings. I wonder though whether there could be some kind of, maybe not doubling from winds, because you're trying to get away from that, right? But if there could be some, like, I don't know, it just feels like it's getting a little weak here compared to the brass. So either figure out some way of strengthening this or softening that, right? So like it's I mean, look at it. It's forte with the brass, forte with the brass, beautiful big wide scoring, and then right in here you have just strings with just the brass, right? So I would drop the brass down here to mezzo forte. That would be a way of solving the problem. And then so once again, the harp is not going to be heard unless it's like up an octave and marked fortissimo. Now, just a question of how much pacing do you want here, right? Do you want this phrase to be, as I've been mentioning it in other evaluations, sort of like a naughty little kid running down the street with their mom chasing them, and you don't really know when they're going to stop or how you're going to catch them or whatever? Or do you want that same wild energy to be paced with da 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 da, you know what I mean? Just really letting us know where the beat is. So that's, even though it sounds beautifully graceful, right, with the harp on top and everything else, is that something that you want? So that's just something that you have to decide, right, whether or not. And it's not. See, like a lot of times, like people are sometimes misunderstanding my suggestions or my evaluation criteria. They are not necessarily universal, or are they judgments on your taste as an orchestrator or anything like that. They are warnings, right? They're things for you to think about. And you can think about it and say, well, I actually really prefer what I did. And then that's fine, then you just move on to the next thing because you're shaping your own aesthetic, right? It's not for me to say that you're right or wrong. It's for me to just point out possible issues, right? But here I would say if you want the harp to be involved here, one thing that might work is just octaves right in here, right? Just take it, just add an octave on top, and that will help and mark up the dynamics to fortissimo. The harp will still tend to disappear around here, but it'll contribute a little bit to the texture. And this will not pace things so drastically. It'll really be more like the combination of this and the harp that will make it feel paced. But if that's what you want, then that's fine with me. At this point, we're going to jump ahead because this level, the Brev level that Richard is a part of, is eligible for evaluating 4 sections out of 5. And with the Brev level as well, I've just allowed the entire arrangement of each entry to be run through the opening mock-up, and that's so that everybody can just comment on everything, right? So if people have suggestions about what to do in the B section, please drop them down below. And I felt it was really nicely done. There are a few comments that I could make, but I think that like the general thrust of my advice on other entries would apply here in any concerns that might be similar. Here at C, we start off with the concern of a convincing allargando expansion and a smooth release into bar 49. Okay, so, I mean, the expansion is here, but the fullness of the expansion does not really compare all that compatibly with what's going on in the piano part, right? So one of the things that I threw in there in the below the staff, which I felt would be a really big clue for all of our arrangers, was the pedal marking, right? So I threw in the pedal mark, which is what all the pianists do. And what is the implication of that pedal mark? That every note that is played by the pianist going up the piano sustains, right? So this might be something you might want to introduce into the score if you're getting it ready to be performed. And that is, adding tones from other instruments in the orchestra and then having them become part of the build. I would say have them come in a little bit softer than the strings and then push forwards and then release. So the smooth release is pretty nice, right? But I would just say, I really feel like I need these D's to maintain, and then the G sharp right in here, and then the B flat, and so on. Now, right in here, the D continues to sustain because of the violas and cellos holding on to it, right? But I mean, could there be some sort of smooth, consistent coloration behind these rising lines that held on to the pitches the same way that the piano did? Because that is such a great effect, right? It's something that pianos do naturally, right? When you hold down the pedal and you have like a big arc going upwards. So is there any way of replicating that wonderful effect? Okay, and then I would just say right here that this is good. This harp scoring right in here, I would say fortissimo is the correct dynamic here. If this is Sibelius, then I would say select this and then type option 5 or alt 5, and then you get the like all dynamic thing, and it'll apply to both staves. Okay, so that leads us to all the issues, all the concerns. The two main ones, all right, are a careful treatment of the melodic voice to make it feel authentic to the composer's style. I feel with the solo oboe in there, that's great. It kind of continues on for a fairly long time just with that oboe player, and that's great, but like give them something to do, right? Don't just have them play mezzo forte, crescendo, and then nothing, right? I mean, what is the what is the nuance of this line? Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Ba da 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 da. Right? What are the nuances? You can't just leave it to the player. You have to give them some guidance. And that's what hairpins are all about, right? They are to flesh out a line, just to really, it's like punctuation, right? So just try to take that approach with like long extended melodies like this. All right, and then the other concern is keeping accompaniment pattern from becoming too regular and therefore too predictable, right? And so that is, once again, that's an aesthetic thing. Is that something that you can only judge for yourself, whether or not you feel that you are falling into a trap. What I would say about all of this is just the way that you've got everything set up. It's very beautiful, okay? And I love, the combination of these long tones, the cellos and clarinets, right? And, just this lovely kind of almost counter melody on the first clarinet and so on. The touch of horn, triple P, that's all beautiful. What I would say is if you have a situation where you've got a cold start right here and everybody is kind of coming to an end and then starting their note again, I would say, try to like maybe die away a little, so that the entrance, so that the other instruments coming in aren't quite so obvious, right? So like the pattern kind of gleaming behind the music, behind the melody, is pretty unobtrusive. But then right here, when this rest comes to an end and everybody comes to an end, it's really obvious, right? If you're really paying attention to the nuances. The other thing I'd say is that there's a bit of dynamic mixing going on here, but it's generally a pianissimo. And then here you've marked piano, right? But I think that it would be better for the bassoon to be pianissimo as well, right? And then that way you would hear more harp. And I don't think it would hurt that line at all. So, but okay, the biggest problem here though is the tempo, right? Doppio più lento ma sempre mosso. So half as fast, or twice as slow, rather, but a little bit faster, right? So twice as slow, but a little bit faster. So, if your previous tempo was the original tempo, which I recommended, which is the dotted half note equals 160, I believe. So like if you are like dropping that in half and then increasing a little bit, then it should be around 100. And what you've got here is about 80, I think, or 84. And it just really feels kind of slow. Like when we get to the places where the the long melodic phrase wraps up, the energy is very, very kind of sleepy. See, right here, like if you listen to the piano part or the piano interpretations, it gets to the end, and the next phrase, right? So like there isn't, like the energy here is just very torporous. You know what I mean? All right, so I would just say that's a way of just like increasing energy and strength and stuff. Just bring it up to 100 right in here. Okay, but like if you do bring it up to 100, immediately you'll just see the energy and like all the scoring that you did in here will work beautifully well. So now we're getting to this, and the rise of this string parts into this melody is just beautiful. It's really, really nicely done. Okay, and now here you are, once again, you've got your balancing act. Everybody playing piano. And then, like right here, I would say harp should be playing mezzo forte. If you want this to balance with the I mean, look, horn versus harp. What does horn do to harp? Horn absorbs the sound of the harp, so you have to back the horn way down, right? I would say, like right in here, it's okay to score, like it's okay to do a little bit of dynamic mixing here, to go to pianissimo with the horn and mezzo piano or even mezzo forte with the harp, right? And I think you get a really beautiful sound. In this case, the horn will be contributing to the harp sound rather than swallowing the harp sound, especially with the cellos along for the ride. Okay, and then yeah, this is so lovely right in here. And then you just have like the little bit of doubling with first flute, and it just gives it a little bit more strength right in here. And then coming in without the flutes, it's also very wise. Okay, you've got some in places in here. You've got some tempo nuances, and but you don't mark them in the score. I feel that like if those nuances are in there, then you should spell them out. Okay. All right. Like for instance, the rubato that I mentioned, that just is so, it is so important for the conductor to know that, right? And the different pulling back and pushing forwards. Oh, so here is like one of those mistakes. All right. So what's the note here? It's E flat, right? You're not just doing the same exact thing twice. All right, so go back to the piano score, take another look at it, fix it, and then move on. Right, like there's more. It's more than just the E flat that is wrong here. There's also a B flat there and a G in. Right. So yeah, so watch out about copy pasting. Right, it can really copy pasting is okay, but just make sure that you run through the parts afterwards and make sure that they are that they are not just that they don't stab you in the back. Okay, so yeah, so I feel that other than those caveats, this stuff all works really really nicely. And then all 30 of your violin players, 16 firsts and 14 seconds, ideally. Dun, 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 dun. Okay, so here's the problem. When you say ritardando here, right, you are just forcing everybody into the same. Like that's not what the piano. That's not what the piano score sounds like. Right? Dun 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 dun. Dun, 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 dun. Do you see what I mean? It's like it is actually an accelerando right in there, right? Okay. So so just rethink this in terms of the tempo that you're asking there. Now, this I felt was very effective, the way that it was scored. It's all very possible in the strings. I think it works. I think it would be nice to like double this, like maybe with the clarinet or something like that, just to make this a little bit more secure and slightly gooey sounding with a clarinet. And then all of these descending bassoon and horn chords right in here. That works really, really great. Now, here from D, I feel that this is very strongly scored. And the puzzle here is how to reinterpret very low, very fast, broken octaves to be playable on instruments of that range. And here you're just making it very, very simple, right? You've got staccato, double bass, and it's at unison, and then as the notes start to rise, you come in an octave lower, and so on, and then join up again at unison when it gets closer together. I feel that's all very strong scoring. And then having bassoons come in, and this is interesting how you're having the bassoons play legato right in there. So, I mean, if that's what you want, you really are going to get that kind of very cushioned, smooth effect behind the music. However, you really should match the dynamic arc in both parts, really. I mean, here you do, but like mezzo forte in the middle of this mezzo piano crescendo, I feel it's just, and then this crescendo coming in here, and yeah, okay, so I think a better way to do this is to put the mezzo forte here, right, and just have the crescendo go across here, and you don't bother putting the mezzo piano in there, right? That way everybody comes out together, right? It's just a little clumsy the way that this is right in here. I mean, I can see the effect that you're going for, but really just try to keep it as simple as possible. The players will all adjust to each other if the dynamic instructions are as simple as possible. And I really love the punctuation here. What if these were 16th notes? Dun dun, right? As opposed to just like dun dun. But I mean, I see like you're going dun 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 dun. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Okay. I mean, yeah, that all works. That's all fine. And you're keeping it kind of condensed, right? In terms of the tone picture, you're not drawing in too many instruments or expanding out to really powerful dynamics. Now here, I'm starting to get a little confused here. Poco largo. So all right, so there was like a in my instructions in the template is poco rallentando to più meno a poco rubato, right? That's not poco largo, right? So a little broadly, and then here you have even more broadly, and I just don't understand that because like there's in your in your mock-up the music doesn't get any slower, right? It just seems to get faster, and I mean, or just keep going fast, just tearing right along, right? So, yeah. So the whole concern about like maintaining the rather hallucinatory feeling of the music despite the straightforward building blocks. I mean, I think you do that to a degree, and I like the combinations of things. I like the little touch of xylophone here. One problem that you're going to run into here is that you're rushing up to here to this forte accent with your winds supporting the strings right in here. You're wonderfully strengthening this phrase, and then suddenly there's nothing, right, for these 4 bars, while the strings kind of tear along very loudly. So just think about what are the implications of this right in here of adding the strength and then subtracting it later on, right? So I mean, yes, there'll be a lot of energy coming from the strings here, but there'll also be a feeling of dropping off. You can hear it in the mock-up, right? What if, so you've got mezzo piano here, mezzo forte. So what if you just want like a little dash of color behind the strings as they rush up to this? What if you were to drop down right here to piano, right? Crescendo to mezzo forte and take away the accent. So try that with your mock-up, okay? Just change that around. Leave the crescendo in there. So piano, crescendo to mezzo forte, no accent, right? And then you'll see like there'll be color right here, but there won't be the feeling of sudden loss of strength. But I mean, looking at the other elements, I feel it's wonderful how you get, a fairly massive sound with just, a couple of horns and a couple of trumpets and a little, dash of timpani here and there, a little roll and so on, right? I mean, the big problem here is not just dropping this off, but it's also like rolling to this big fortissimo hit, right? This will basically dominate everything, and all of the beautiful nuances and colors you're trying to accomplish here by doubling up here will sort of be lost, right? So I would say it's perfectly fine to go piano crescendo to forte accent. That is enough. That is all that the timpani needs to do here, in my estimation, in terms of balancing things. All right, and that takes us here. And this is beautiful, full-blooded scoring. I love it. It's great. Just a thought of like, what if you held back the piccolo, right? What if the piccolo were an octave lower, right? And then here you ran up to this E flat and then up to the F sharp. So you didn't quite give the game away yet, right? Because a lot of it will just get absorbed anyway, but it'll start to ring out really, really clear. And see, like, because I feel like, yeah, like you're going all the way up here to E flat and F and so on. Like, so these very high pitches are, you're almost getting as high here. So just there was the similar concern before in section A. Like, are you giving the game away of being super high with your piccolo? So either it'll get absorbed into the sound of the strings and the flutes, or it will ring out very clearly, and that ringing out will sort of subtract the suspense of really getting up to that F sharp. You know what I mean? So it's just something to think about in terms of that. Yeah, and then this is very nice. So with some other entries, I have sort of cautioned about the beginning of this, right? That, like, how it could get really swallowed into the overhanging kind of crashing sound of everything else. And I would say there is a similar concern here, but you can take care of it by going to forte piano here and not having, just having a splash on your cymbals and then like having it be quite short, just like a quarter note's length, right? Because what's going to happen here is you're going to have a lot of strength, even with a smaller orchestra, and the orchestra is going to punch that chord, and especially with timpani, with cymbals, with this overhanging fortissimo diminuendo to piano, that will all swallow the first beat and a half or so going forward. So, like, when will you really start to hear these patterns? By the time they're half over, right? So, in my score, I had everything come to an end on an eighth note, and then I had a pausa, like a comma, and then right. So there was just time for the room to breathe, right? And then the next part came in. Now this is strange, a tempo, right? So that's not really kind of what happens in the piano score. It's an agitato, right? So, and the agitato should really start not on the downbeat; it should start on the rotating patterns that follow, right? So, and if anything, there's a rallentando here, right? Which I put in parentheses in the template score. Ba 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 da dun 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 dun. Right, and then that punch right on the downbeat, boom, is kicking off. The next passage is really excited over the effort, but it's liberated from it, right? So that the orchestra pushed that rock to the very top of the hill, and now it's rolling down the other side, right? So I would say go forte piano here, and then you can maintain the ties, right? And then, or even forte pianissimo, right? Because I really love this color that you've got behind here. So you could really just drop everything and just make it an accent, and then just dropping down to very, very soft behind this, and this will stand out beautifully if you do that, right? And and then just a tish, right? It's very, very nice. So yeah, and I feel that this is very nicely done. No need to change anything. Now here, changing the screen over to just before E, the concern is whether or not there's a convincing transition from the fragmentation to the lyric part of E. And I feel that you accomplished that very simply with just this one single horn note. I feel that ties things over really beautifully. And then, of course, leads to these background pads here in clarinets and bassoon. And you're keeping them very, very soft. And I think that's just a powerful little color behind everything else that's going on. Powerful in its discretion. Now, right in here we've got this ya da 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 bum 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 bum. Now, probably as you noticed in the mock-up, the strings are absorbing the sound of the flute. So if you really want that beautiful radiant sound on top of the first flute, just kind of working in conjunction with the violins and more being kind of just a kind of an added color above really than being a line on its own that that adds an octave, then that is what you'll get. And I think it sounds great. If that's all intentional, then that's fantastic. If you wanted this to stand out, then I would just say mark solo right here, and then the player will play soloistically, and then you'll hear it more. Now, there's a lot of stuff that I really love here, and one of it is just the the way that you have scored these Bs, like seemingly infrequent, but really just adding a certain amount of punctuation to the melody. It's just really lovely. Such a great touch. About the only thing I would say here that needs a bit of tweaking is right here you've marked your harp at the same level as your strings, right? And the problem with the strings is that, like, if the strings are the same volume as the harp, then you really you are taking away the feeling of rotation from the pattern, right? Because when when this pattern here is played, transcribed exactly from piano to strings, then you hear this da 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 dum, and then here ba 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 ba, like that, and the sustaining of these notes, right, which would just kind of turn into the kind of cloud of sustain on the piano, and not really stand out. It really just become it just really becomes something that I feel pulls at the momentum of the music in a kind of an unnatural way. So, by putting this on equal footing with the harp, then I just feel it just takes away from the beautiful sense of rotation of the pattern, right? So, don't do this. Don't take away the note that's supposed to be right here, right? Just have the harp play all of the notes, and including this one, right? Just like wherever it starts, just have the harp come in, and have the harp marked up to, say, like mezzo piano or mezzo forte. So really make the accompaniment be about the harp as supported by the strings. And then I think you can't go wrong here. Yeah, and then once again we're kind of continuing this on, and here you are fattening it with oboe and so on. So I mean, about the only thing that I would comment on, just like in terms of proportions, right? Because that's very important to you. And then this other concern of authenticity of style and choice of melodic voice. Like, these are things that you've done before, right? Adding flutes to strings, having the oboe be an important voice, and so on and so forth. Is there anything that you have not done yet, right? Is there any color that you have not pursued yet that could bring a sense of freshness, right? Because right now we've got a beautiful sense of continuity, but is that sense of continuity with previous treatments of the melody something that will just make it feel less fresh, right, as we get towards the end of this beautiful passage? Right? Is there something you could bring to this that would change the context a little bit, and just one slight touch here, right? Like maybe just having this be a low flute solo and just getting rid of the oboes and the violins entirely, right? I mean, there are a bunch of different things you could do. I'm not going to sit around and suggest, try a horn solo, try a timpani solo. I'm not going to pile on the suggestions, but I mean, is there some way of freshening up the sense of lyricism, like who else could say something lyrical that would also feel inevitable to you as an orchestrator? And just once again, I really love the punctuation of the melody by the pizzicato lower strings. Okay, so now we're getting into this, and I love the callback to xylophone and temple block, and a little high note on the bassoon. See, it's just one single bassoon. It's totally fine. And yeah, okay. So the problem that we've got here is that the right hand of the harp is going to pretty much disappear. The left hand, not such a bad thing, although the G sharps will kind of get stomped on, right? So, yeah, and to make problems even more, to make an even bigger problem, pianissimo non arpeggiando, and softer than the other elements. So we're not going to really hear much harp in here. It'll add a little bit of color to the pizzicato, and if that's what you want, then that's what you're going to get. Okay, but like how this could balance is mark the harp mezzo piano and don't mess with the non arpeggiando, because like every time you have pizzicato and our non arpeggiando working together, the pizzicato wins, right? Because the pizzicato, you've got like divisi, you've got 8 players each playing each of these notes, and here we only have one string on each pitch, right? So there's hands down the pizzicato of the violins is going to work way better here, or going to come through way better. But however, if there's a balance, if there's the harps maybe up to mezzo piano here, then I think it'll come through a little bit better. All right, and then we've got, and all this right in here is lovely. Okay, so now what did I put in the template? A tempo, eighth note equals eighth note. You have to include that. Okay, I didn't put that in the template for no reason. That you are telling the conductor to not just suddenly turn the 3/8 into 3/4. Okay, so you have to put that in there. Now, as to lointain, that is actually up to you as an orchestrator to actually score into the score, right? It should just feel that way. And you shouldn't even have to mention it. But if you do need to mention it, put it after the dynamic rather than as part of the system text. Okay. And then I'm not sure what you mean here. Like tenuto? Teneramente? Huh. All right. Bum, ba-da-da-dum. I think that's very cool. That's all great. Yeah, I really like the scoring in here, and this is cool. Like I've been keel hauling people for giving first bassoon parts to second bassoonists and so on, giving first wind parts to second wind parts. But this makes perfect sense because you're having your first bassoon come in high later, right? So it's absolutely right what you're doing here. And notice here, like this isn't being given to the second clarinet; it's being given to the first. That's exactly right, right? And then with doubling with violas and so on. I feel this is very strong scoring right in here. However, if everybody's going to drop down to pianissimo, so should the timpani. All right, especially the timpani. Yeah, and then harp should be mezzo piano or mezzo forte in here. And and then I hear blah bum. This should be mezzo piano. Bling. Pianist triple P and everybody else, that should be piano in the harp. Especially at non arpeggiando. It's just for the same reasons that I said before. Even with this very beautiful, soft, mysterious scoring, you even got like a natural, like a touch 5 harmonic right here. Even at all of that, and muted triple P trumpet, you should still have this marked up. I think to piano. Now this works really, really nicely. Like the sustain is not going to really last very long on the harp, so it's just basically adding a bit of attack to the beginning of these notes, da-dum, and then they continue holding, and then you go pling to also add some attack to the end right here. So yeah, just really nicely done here at the end. I feel that this, I mean, I don't really have a bunch of critiques for this. The first bassoon doubling the first violins, it's just such a nice idea. That's great right in there. And then the horns doubling the middle strings. It's just wonderful ideas. Yeah, and then the clarinets going down and supporting the violas here. It's just really nice. Okay, so great work, Richard. A real exciting score full of colors and life and as I said, nicely balanced proportions. That is one of those things that makes a work feel inevitable, right? Like whatever happens next in the score is meant to happen. And that can be just a real trial for somebody who is getting into orchestration to sort of find that balance, to find that place where it just really works and you are absolutely doing the next thing. So just this would be something where I would have developing orchestrators like look at this just in terms of that craft, the craft of doing that. So just look, really nicely done, and something that will stick with me. And yeah, like I would say, try to get this performed. Okay, think about some of those amendments that I recommended, especially just balancing things. Not having the harp part play really softly behind other instruments that will easily drown it out. You know what to do. But the main thing that I need to say right here at the end of the video is just to thank you so much for sending me such a cool score, just to really keeping the level of entries here nice and committed and artistic and really worth watching, right? I'm something that I really didn't expect, I wanted to happen but didn't really expect would happen, is that a lot of people are watching nearly all of the entries, right? Nearly all of the entry videos, and a lot of them are commenting, and some of them are really commenting a lot, and it is this kind of effort that makes it worthwhile, along with everybody else's. So thanks so much, Richard. Thank you for supporting on Patreon. That means a huge amount. And, thanks to all the Patreon supporters that are making this possible for everybody else out there on the internet, whether it's these challenges or the, regular release of tips, videos about, orchestration questions and lectures and things like that. It just, a lot of people owe a very small group of very committed, very generous people who are being very kind to me in their support. So thanks to you, and thanks to everybody out there in the community who is sticking with this all the way to the triumphant end, which is coming fairly soon, within about 2.5 weeks. All right. Keep it strong. Keep the comments coming, and the shares and the likes and the activity around these posts really makes a difference. And if you are part of a particular category, please comment on the other people in your category. Like if you're in the same website evaluation group, comment on the other people. If you're in the same Brev group, comment on the other posts in your category here on YouTube or under the Patreon post. All right, thanks all, and another evaluation will be coming very, very soon.